Welcome to I Have Some Questions. The show is all about asking questions our guests have never asked themselves before, never thought about, or been too afraid to explore. It's designed to uncover the human story at the root of successes and failures and help us as an audience learn and grow from that story. My hope is that you'll hear brilliant guests exploring new ideas and challenging themselves in new ways of thinking. I think this makes for great conversations. I'm going to bring on entrepreneurs, authors, coaches, scientists, and frankly, any vein of super interesting, successful, and passionate human I can find. I am fascinated by passionate people, and I have some questions for them. I'm Erik Berglund, and I hope you'll join me every week for new episodes. Alli, we often talk about what to do when things are going wrong, some of the catastrophic moments or challenges or hurdles that we face as leaders, but sometimes things are going right. And you recognize that the people you're working for actually are ready to take on more, and that there's an opportunity to delegate in the truest sense of the word, hand over full responsibility for something. But usually if you just take that leap, it's kind of painful. So I've started thinking about it more as like engineering opportunity. I've heard you use the concept of stretch goals and scaffolding before. Maybe you could elaborate, like, how do you identify when somebody's ready or needs to be stretched in that way? And then what does that play look like for you? How do you engineer those moments so that they're meaningful, but that the failure isn't too consequential?
Oh, that's such a small question.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive in. So in terms of how do you know when somebody's ready, I think there are a few different ways. One is a forcing function. Like, they may or may not be ready, but because of the realities, like I've mentioned the acquisition that I went through a couple of years ago, because of the realities of the situation you are in, they might have to get ready. So that's one. Two is they've shown an interest in something. Like, you know that they want to lead a program someday, or maybe they want to be a project manager. And you're like, okay, let's help get you to that next level so that we can see if you can do it before you end up getting promoted and run 17 things. And three is they don't necessarily say, like, I want to do X, Y, or Z, but maybe you notice that they have a natural inclination for something, and it's something that you at your level should probably hand off or can. So those are kind of the three buckets, at least off the top of my head, that I would think through. When it comes to how, do you have a question?
No, I was going to ask the next one. Like, okay, that makes sense. And
we stop there. Podcast over. No. When it comes to how to actually do it, first things first in my world is like, okay, what is this? And I'm doing this solo first. I'm not doing it with anybody else. I'm going, what is the thing that needs to be done? The project, the campaign, the whatever it is. Like, what is the thing? What does success look like? And I'm also going to lay out, where do I think that this person, whether I write it down or it's just in my head, where do I think this person is actually going to excel on this project already? Like, because they probably have skills in some areas. And where do I think they might fall short? I may or may not be right, but I want to have some idea of what I'm walking into. And then I'm going to set a conversation with them. They'll have a heads up ahead of time of like, hey, here's the project, here's why we're doing it, whether it's tied to their goals or an organizational need, like what's in it for them. And I'm going to lay out what the project looks like, what it needs to look like at the end, and have a coaching conversation like you do all the time. But one of the things that I'm going to leave them with is, here's what the end goal looks like. And I recognize that this is a bigger project that you've ever worked on, or whatever, insert whatever sentence works. So what I want to do is have you go back, think about this on your own a little bit, and you tell me what scaffolding, which is like my favorite word, what scaffolding do you need to put in place to make sure that this goes well? And I actually put that on them. And I have my own ideas, but I put that on them first. And then they come back and they share them. And so for one, it was, okay, yes, but I want a dedicated section in our one-on-one where I can share updates and you can help tell me, yes, we're in the right direction or no. And I want a course on X. I think it was a LinkedIn learning course. And I was like, okay. For another one, it was, I want to send you a weekly recap of like, here's what's working, here's what's not. Another one was, this is great, I'm nervous. Can we put a placeholder on the calendar so that if I have questions every other week or something, we can talk through them? And so the scaffolding for me always started with them. Like, what do you think you need? And then if there's something that I thought also needed to be added in, I would do that, but I wanted them to lead.
Man, I love that answer. Well,
Because there isn't a royal we in it very much.
well, I do like the absence of that. But no, what I really like about it is often when we try to delegate to people, we tell them, I'm saying that way too kindly. Often when we delegate to people, we should tell them what the end state looks like you described. Like, here's where I want you to get to, right? There's this clarity is kindness, Brene Brown mentality, which is accurate and good. But we stop there. I have had bosses who tell me, I want you to get to this place, and then they go radio silent about
it. Good luck.
And you're left in a place, if you're not given clear instruction, you're left in this place. It's like, well, like, I got a lot of other shit to do, and I don't know how to prioritize that. I don't know what percentage of my time should go in moving in that direction. And so we often don't take action. And sure, there's the ideal person who says, great, boss, and they just go do it. But that's pretty rare.
Especially if we're talking about a stretch project. Like,
Amen.
This is something typically beyond their current capability.
And so often that sharing of desired outcome ends up over time creating more frustration for the leader. And I've heard, and you have too, leaders say who they didn't take, I'm trying to give them this opportunity. They haven't grown into it. They haven't done anything. I haven't seen any action from them. That's because it was unprompted. But your attitude of, I'm going to get them to think and then tell me, I love the scaffolding visual because it very much paints the picture. I'm not doing anything for you other than making sure you have access. That's what the scaffold does, safely access to the area you need to do the work. And if you don't have it,
I've never thought about that before. Like, I love the term scaffolding, but that's such a good point. And the other thing I didn't say, but was part of this, is I had them for these bigger projects. I also had them set milestones. I was like, throw a dart at the wall. Like, you don't necessarily know. I don't know because it's the first time you've done it, but I want a dart at the wall. And we would check in on those milestones. And if they hit them, great. If they didn't, okay, why not? What did you learn? How do we need to adjust?
Yeah, giving them the prompt, the visual of the milestones, the recognition that it's on them to describe the foundation upon which they think they could successfully do it. Maybe the ability to milestone it sets that person up. Now they do own it. Now I, as the manager, know I've actually told you something that you need to take action on and communicate back to me in whatever timeline we set for. And I think that alleviates one of the biggest challenges that people have with these stretch projects or goals that they may assign people. It's like they lob them out there and hope something happens. But the scaffolding imagery and ownership mentality, I think, would be a critical thing to do. I'll add one more layer to it that I found to be helpful. And that's just, I spend a lot of time thinking about the failure modalities of my team members. Like, how do they fail?
Okay, in English.
Yeah, well, we all have different ways that we fail, right? You've worked with me long enough to know that I'm probably going to fail at having to document something or take good notes. Like, I'm just not the person.
Or do something if it's not in your calendar.
Or do something if I'm supposed to remember it rather than write it down. Exactly, right? You know me. So that's unlikely to ever change for me. And if somebody were to set me up with a stretch project where that was a requirement for success, we would probably both be pretty disappointed. That wouldn't be a meaningful way to help me grow. But I have team members who struggle in the opposite way. Their failure modality is they're going to try and perfect it before they ever ship it. Right?
Hello, that's me.
Yeah, it could be Alli, right? So if you know the failure modality, the way in which they're most likely to struggle, which you often do, and if you spend a little bit of time thinking about it, you're like, oh, okay, if they're going to screw this up, how's it probably going to go? Then you try to engineer the type of project where that type of failure actually is fine. It's not just that there is failure that can happen. It's that the type of failure modality they're most likely to express, they're going to take way too freaking long on this thing. That's okay. That thing doesn't have a hard deadline. It's not, we do need to still hold them to a deadline, but let's just align with that. The stretching we're trying to do is not speeding up Alli. The stretching we're trying to do is new competency, new comfort, new relationship, new skill. So if you can know that failure modality first and then pick the type of project where that's aligned and that's okay, that minimizes the consequence and makes it a lot easier for you to not feel stressed because you handed over something that if they fail in their way, that's exactly what I expected to happen anyway.
Yep. It's the difference between like, ooh, wishful thinking. I handed this thing off. I told him what success looks like. What the heck? Like nothing happened versus like, all right, let's create a plan. And you, Erik, are leading it.
Yeah. The last piece to maybe add, there's this mentality that if you don't know where you're going, any path can get you there. And quite often as leaders, we don't have enough time to sit down and think about our team members and where we want them to get to in a future state of capability. So it makes it very hard to pick the thing that we would like them to build scaffolding around, or the thing where their failure modality is actually aligned. And so if you don't take the time to really process, like fast forward 6 months and this person's magically capable of one more thing.
What do you want that to be?
What do you want it to be? And why is that a good idea? I think that's a pretty critical starting place too, even if you're not at a point of the conversation or scaffolding or action or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I'd add, which might be my takeaway, is regardless of how the thing goes, they've done the stretch project, that you had the scaffolding in place, etc. At the end, and set this expectation at the beginning. At the end, call it whatever you want, but do some sort of after action review and have them ahead of time kind of self-analyze, self-diagnose on a couple questions. Like, what did they do really well? What was challenging? What would they do differently in the future? What did they learn through the experience? And if things broke down, talk through those as well, but set the expectation up front that like, this is something that you're going to do, you're going to own, and then we're going to learn from and figure out what we do next going forward.
Great perspective. It made me remember, we've been doing some deep dive research into the history of corporate training to really understand, like, why does corporate training look the way that it looks? And we're doing this largely because Luminary takes a very different approach to it. And really, we think that the big problem is that corporate training is misaligned. It was never set up to be successful for what it does now. And so we started doing research on this. And the origin of corporate training really dates back to the very first printing press company. I can't remember the name of them off my head right now. We'll call it late 1800s. The very first corporate training companies came about because you had the ability to mass print materials. Prior to that, it was all done through apprenticeship. And if you could imagine being an apprentice, maybe in a blacksmith's office, maybe a baker, maybe a gardener, maybe a farmer, right, of some sort, you're apprenticed over to this person, and they know that if they try to sell the bread that's been made by a apprentice they haven't trained correctly, they're going to get in trouble. It's not going to work well for them. There's a heavy investment by the master, if you will, to make sure the apprentice is ready to do the work. You could not have just said, here's a project, go and do it. Make 47 loaves for that bakery over there or that restaurant over there and bring them over. Like, you'll never get that business back again. We've lost some of that direct connection to the consequence of failure of developing people because we've outsourced it to a corporate training mentality, as opposed to, if you can skip past some of the current challenges we have with the word master, maybe the master-apprentice relationship is better suited for a lot of the work we need people to do. And so I think a lot of what we're talking about, build the scaffolding, identify where you need them to be, have clarity on that, align the failure modality, is probably something that anybody who pre-corporate training had apprentices would have been like, no shit, that's obviously what to do. But we've kind of lost that art of apprenticeship, I think, in most fields that I think we're coming back to a little bit now. Anyway, if you had to sum it up, what's one thing you would leave somebody with if they're trying to think about how to get somebody to take on a stretch project?
Well, I think listen to the entire episode, because it'll basically give you the crash course and how to. What I would say as a takeaway is handing these things off can feel scary. It can feel like your reputation is on the line, or your direct report isn't going to do it right, or whatever. And so I would say, you've probably been listening to that voice for a while. It's okay that it's there. It's trying to protect you, but don't let it have the driver's seat. Like, pick something, try and do a stretch project with some scaffolding at first. You might not get it right on the first try, but if you never try, you're never going to be able to hand things off in the future.
Yeah, you got to have some courage there. Great point. I think I'd leave with, we talked a lot about tactics. Doesn't really matter what tactics you use if you don't think about where you need them to be in the future beforehand. Which again, I think previously you would have known where you needed your apprentice to be pretty clearly. Make sure you take the time to think through that. It's going to go a lot better for you. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks. Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to take a second and subscribe. Maybe even share this episode with somebody it made you think of, or someone you think would take some value from it. This show is all about uncovering the brilliance and humanity of high performers. And whether those performers have a massive following, or a podcast, or a book, or they're a business owner, or they're buried somewhere in a corporation, or maybe they're a nonprofit leader, or they don't necessarily have to have a title. I'm really fascinated by people who are passionate and who are doing interesting things. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email at hello@languageofleadership.io to make that connection. I'll see you next week.